Hello my friends, Hank here, and today we're going to be building up this brand new 2024 Academy Zündapp KS 750 motorcycle and sidecar in 1/35th scale. This kit comes as part of a lovely little combo pack with a Panzer I, which we're going to get to in a later video as well, but for now, let's take a step-by-step look at how this bike builds up. As you might expect, let's start out with step number 1. We'll begin by removing all the pieces for our front wheel assembly here from sprue Y, which conveniently holds all of the pieces we're going to need for this whole bike. Our brakes, spokes, and the wheel itself all sandwiched together here with no problem at all. I was very impressed by the quality of the molding on this tire. It's quite detailed. Our front mudguard here also slots into a little guide hole on top of the tire, so you know you've got the right alignment. Only one way to do it. Next, let's assemble our headlight. Just two little pieces here. Unfortunately, no clear plastic piece for the light, but we'll make do. To wrap up step number 1, we need to carefully align all the parts of our forks and the handlebars. These are rather delicate little parts, but the guide pins that Academy has provided sculpted into these pieces ensure that they will only fit together correctly one way, which is super helpful. Just take your time, go slow. I opted to slide the headlight into place last, which worked out pretty well for me. If you're using some extra thin cement, you can also jostle these parts around a little bit while the cement does its magic until everything is aligned just right. With our front fork all set, let's move on to step number 2. The bulk of this step is combining the two halves of our engine crankcase. One side, as you can see, is sculpted right in here with our rear mudguard, which is a nice touch. We'll also need to go ahead and assemble our rear wheel here. Same sort of approach as before, just sandwiching together the spokes, the wheel, and the rear brake disc. Next, we can get a little cement on this guide pin on our rear mudguard and carefully seat our rear wheel into place like so. Moving on to step number 3, we've got to get both sides of our main frame of the bike on here. These align and seat into a few guide pins on either side of the engine assembly and front fork that we just built up in our previous steps. I opted to get the frames more or less situated where they needed to be and then wiggled the front fork into place last to ensure that I didn't accidentally cement the ability to steer the bike into one position. As you can see, we've still got some nice smooth turn up in the front here. On to step number 4. The bulk of this step is all about assembling our engine cylinders. The Zündapp KS 750 features what's called a flat twin engine, or a boxer engine, so the pistons move in and out perpendicularly to the frame of the bike. Can't say we didn't learn something today, huh? Each one of these heads builds up in two pieces here, and these will sit on either side of the crankcase. Once again, big old mounting holes to ensure that these can only fit into place the correct way. Thank you very much, Academy. We've also got some very small fiddly little bits to install in this step, including our foot gear shift, our rear brake pedal, and our foot pegs, so just go slow with those. And finally, for step number 4, let's attach this lovely exhaust assembly. Cruising right along here, we're on to step number 5. First up, we've got to plop our gas tank up here on the top of the frame. This is nicely molded in one big piece and sits on there without any issue. And next, we've got to mount the rest of our exhaust piping underneath the bike here. Be sure that those pipes tie into each of our heads on either side of the bike as well. There are some fine little guide holes for those. To wrap up step 5, we also need to stick this saddlebag assembly back here on our rear mudguard. And how could we forget? Got to get our Kickstarter on there. Lovely. On to step number 6. First up, seats. We've got 2 of them on this bike. First one up here is for our driver, obviously, and that is going to sit into place on a small notch at the front behind the gas tank, and it's going to rest on these very nicely molded shocks in the back. Our passenger seat sits in place right behind our driver, and we have a small little handle ring here for our passenger to hold on to. This slides right into place between the 2 seats. Next, we can slide down here to this gear shifter assembly. That's going to mount into place on the right side of our bike frame. It's a tiny little piece, so of course, take time not to accidentally launch it halfway across your workspace. And to wrap up step number 6 here, let's mount the frame of our sidecar onto our completed bike. Be sure not to forget this small tow hook that mounts onto the frame as well. Starting with step number 7 here, we're switching gears and moving on to our sidecar assembly. The first thing to do is join these two main halves together and attach this bow piece to the front of the sidecar. Step number 8 is all about these additional saddlebags. We have 2 of them, and these are going to mount on either side of our sidecar. Unfortunately, I managed to misplace one of the little pieces here, so I'm going to have to figure out how to cover that up, maybe with some sort of accessory down the road. But my mistake, just be sure you don't lose any of these little pieces as you're working along at home. We also have to drop the seat for our passenger in here as well. Step number 9 starts out with this trunk assembly on the back of our sidecar for some additional storage. Very nice. With some modifications, I'm sure you could position this open and add some detailed accessories in there if you wanted to. Also part of step number 9, we have to build up this mount for our MG34. This was a very delicate little build, so I had to get nice and close off camera and make sure everything lined up perfectly. As you can see though, this fits in here on the front of our sidecar hood quite nicely. Step number 10 starts out with some additional framing arms connected to our bike from the sidecar. As we've learned with this kit, very nice guide holes to ensure that these can only go in the correct way. Love it. And now we can drop our whole sidecar assembly into place on the frame. No fuss here, just ensure that those leaf spring suspension arms that go on as part of this step slide into the guide holes on either side of the frame. And then to wrap up step number 10, let's sandwich together our sidecar wheel. Fun fact, one of the cool things about the Zündapp KS 750 is that both rear wheels are shaft driven, so you're getting power not only from the rear wheel of the bike, but from the sidecar as well. A little extra juice never hurt, right? And for our final step, step number 11, all we need to do is build up and mount our spare wheel on the back of our sidecar. We're going to hold off on our MG34 until after our figures are added and painted up and all of that, because we don't want to accidentally knock that machine gun off along the way. And with that, we've got ourselves a stunning little Zündapp KS 750 motorcycle. Now, of course, we need to address our 2 figures and the painting process for this whole thing, so we're going to hash those out in our next few episodes here. To be sure you don't miss all the progress on this project, be sure to subscribe right here to Spruce and Bruce Scale Modeling if you haven't done so already. And until next time, my friends, be well, happy building, cheers.